We'll start by turning the meeting over to Mr. Hargis to introduce our meeting.
Good. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. The fourth member is present, so we'll begin this meeting. Good afternoon. The Metropolitan Board of Zoning Appeals is now in session for its regularly scheduled meeting of June 3rd, 2021. I'm Joey Hargis, the interim zoning administrator, and I'll be presenting the cases for review in today's public hearing. Today's public hearing, we are encouraging folks to socially distance and wear masks to protect yourselves and the other citizens of Tennessee in light of this COVID-19 outbreak. For these public hearings, the board reviews correspondence submitted in support and opposition to the cases prior to today's meeting, and the board reviews any correspondence and recommendations from other metro agencies in preparation of today's hearing. In today's hearing, I'll present staff report first and go through the slides and photographs, and then I will turn it over to the appellant to present their case to the board. The appellant will have 10 minutes to present their case if there's opposition present to their case. In a case that has no opposition, the appellant will have 5 minutes to present your case. For the folks here, if you're both the applicant and opposition, that 10 minutes is in total, not per speaker. So it's if you've got multiple folks that wish to speak, please work out dividing up the time before you come up. When you do come up, if you'll come forward and have a seat at the table, turn on the microphone. You'll see the little red ring. There's a little button right out there to the right of the microphone. The red ring will be on, and if you'll state your name and address and present your testimony to the board. At the conclusion of each hearing, the board will close the public hearing and deliberate on the case before you, and then vote on the case. The board is vested with the power to act on the cases as outlined in Section 1740-180 of the Metro Code of Law. All section numbers that I refer to today come from the zoning code, which applies to the entire jurisdiction of Metro government. This zoning code was adopted and became effective January 1st, 1998, and I introduce and make a part of the record this zoning code that's here. Because the BZA meetings are recorded for the Metro Nashville network, it's imperative anyone wishing to address this board to come forward at the table, identify themselves, and make their presentation. The code requires that 4 members of the 7-member board be present to constitute a quorum. The code also requires that you have 4 affirmative votes to grant your case. In the event that you do not receive 4 affirmative votes today, your case will stay on our agenda for the next 30 days. If no one changes their vote and you still do not achieve 4 affirmative votes after 30 days, your case is deemed denied by operation of law. Pursuant to the board's rules, any aggrieved party may appeal this board's decision to Chancery or Circuit Court by common law writ of certiorari within 60 days of this hearing. Additionally, BZA rules require that any aggrieved party can file a motion for rehearing by the board within 60 days of today's hearing. That submittal must encompass new evidence that has not been not possible to be presented today. After that 60 days has elapsed, this board's decision is final and no further action can be taken. If you're an appellant and your case is granted, it is necessary for you to finish up and obtain the permit for which you've applied. You've got 2 years to pick up that permit for this board's approval to remain valid. As long as you pick up your permit within that 2 years, this board's approval will continue on in perpetuity. It should be noted that if you've presented false or misleading testimony to this board today, this board may revoke your approval at a later date by means of a show cause hearing. Mr. Chairman, I submit that all cases were filed in proper order. All appellants were notified by certified mail as required by the code, and legal notice requirements have been fulfilled.
Great, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I've got one preliminary announcement. On our agenda today, we had previously had scheduled rules and procedure updates to be adopted. We're going to postpone that. I've got some additional corrections to make, and I'll bring that back to the board when it's ready.
Okay,
for your consideration.
Thank you. And I know that Councilmember Hager is here, and you're certainly welcome to speak at either before the meeting or after the case that you're here for. And just whenever you'd like to speak, council members certainly have that privilege, and we welcome you. Okay. All right, thank you. All right, then I think we'll move to the first case.
First case, First case before us, case 2021-75. Mr. Harris Dallin, the appellant and owner of the property located at 349 Willowbow Lane, requesting variances in rear setback and building material requirements in the RS-30 residential accessory structure overlay district. The appellant is requesting to construct a detached garage referred to the board under section 1712-020A and 1736-590. The appellant has alleged the board would have jurisdiction under section 1740-180, item B. Mr. Dallin, if you'll have a seat, sir, I'm going to present our case first, and then I'll turn it over to you to present your testimony.
Yeah, sir. Well, in just 1 minute, we'll get you to turn your microphone on, but Mr. Hargis is going to go over the facts of the case and then let you do your presentation.
Yep. Mr. Chairman, we do have opposition present, so each side will have 10 minutes to present their case. Mr. Dallin, of that 10 minutes, you may want to reserve some for rebuttal testimony, so that will come out of your 10 minutes. The subject property is highlighted here in red on the east margin of Willowbow Lane. The hatch shaded area is the residential accessory structure overlay that applies to this property. Mr. Dallin is requesting variances in rear setback. He's proposing a rear setback of 2 feet. The requirement is 20 feet based on the size of the structure, and he has requested in his application this overlay requires that you match the building materials of the residence. And let me get you the actual requirement of that section. Mr. Chairman and members, reading from the code, I apologize, I left my reading glasses in the office, but it says that the guidelines under section 1736-590 state that accessory structures greater than 150 square feet must be constructed in a like manner to the principal building in terms of roof style and building materials. Metal, plastic, vinyl, and concrete masonry units are prohibited as primary siding materials for the accessory structures greater than 150 square feet, except where the material is the primary material of the principal structure. So this is an aerial photograph showing the subject property's location there with the red marker. This is a view of the front of the residence. The materials, as you see on the building, are brick side. And then a view of the proposed location of the garage will be located toward the rear of the property here where my cursor is located there. And then views of the rear property lines of adjoining properties. Street views of the existing residence adjoining. But I will leave that. That's the presentation as I have it. Mr. Dallin, I'll turn it over to you. You have 10 minutes to present your case to the board. And go ahead and begin, sir.
Yes, sir. If you would state your name and your address, and then tell us why you are here, what your request is to the board.
My name is Harris Dallin. I live at 349 Willowbow Lane. And I would like to build a building at the back of my space, which is 2 feet off the tree line. Or, if I can't do that, I'm going to build the building right up against my house. Does anybody want to make a...
Well, sir, you've asked for a variance from the rear setback of the home, and for this board to grant a variance, we have to find a hardship. And I know that you had stated an easement in your application, but it's my understanding that the easement is at the rear of your property line. So explain to the board, and then you also had asked for a variance for material requirements for the building that you're asking to build. So help us understand what the specific request is regarding the material variance, and then also what the hardship is for not being able to build this building at the proper setback.
Well, between me and the house behind me, the house behind me comes out to the swimming pool, to the swimming pool house, and 10 feet back stops their property line. So that means when you leave there and head toward the tree line, you have 48 feet of easement coming through there.
Do you have we have a letter in our packet that says there's not, that we don't show, and maybe I'll ask Mr. Hargis, is there any evidence that you all have of a 48-foot easement? I think that there is shown on one of the drawings a 10-foot utility easement. Is there?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman.
And sir, do you have any evidence of a 48-foot easement?
The recorded subdivision plat for Brandywine Farms, this is section 19 of Brandywine Farms, shows a 10-foot utility easement along the rear property line. There are two areas marked, in which you've got in your packet, that marked numbers 1 and 2. Those are back at the time when these lots were platted for septic systems. I believe this entire neighborhood is now on sewer. But those fields are areas platted on the subdivision plat. That's those boxed areas which you had in your application there.
And so would that be an area where nothing could be built?
They could not have been built at the time there was a septic system involved. Once their hookup occurred to the sewer system, those fields have essentially, those easements, if you will, are extinguished since there's no need for them. But that 10-foot utility easement still exists along the rear property boundary.
So I guess the question for the board is, if there's a 10-foot utility easement, but you would be required to build 20 feet from the back property line, what would keep you from building at 20 feet? Why do you need to go closer to your property line?
Well, if I don't build it back that far, then the only other way I go is to build it to the back of my house.
Okay.
So what's wrong with the 2 foot off the easement? It's 48 foot from the property line over here to the property line here, 48 foot.
Yeah, I'm not, you're asking, the request that you're asking for the board is to build 2 feet from the property line. Not 2 feet from an easement or anything else. 2 feet from the property line is the request on your application. And so I don't know if that's what you intended, but that's what you brought before this board. And so I'm not sure that I know what to tell you other than the code requires you to build 20 feet from your property line, not from the easement, not from anything else. If there's an easement, then that is something that you can work with codes on to make sure you're in compliance. But if you're required to build within 20 feet of, at least 20 feet from your back property line, you're asking for 2. And I'm not sure I've gotten what the hardship is or what the reason is for wanting to be 2 feet from your property line. Has nothing to do with the tree line. I don't know where the tree line is. I don't know where the easement is, other than it's a 10-foot easement on the back of your property. So I need to understand, again, you have 2 requests before the board. One is to build a building 2 feet from the property line, and the other is to use materials that are different from what is required by the overlay.
The materials that I build that will be brick. It'll be just exactly like the house.
Then why are you requesting a materials variance?
I don't understand you.
You specifically requested, and that's why we're here today, is because in your application, you asked for a variance of the type of materials. That is correct?
Mr. Chairman, in his submittal, he posted that he would like to do metal fascia and vinyl soffit.
If I build it back there, I will have somebody coming in. They will lay a foundation. On that foundation, I will build up the garage, 24 feet inside. Therefore, you can put a crew cab dually diesel truck and still be able to walk around it.
Yeah, and sir, we're not here, the size is not an issue for us. The size is an issue between you and Metro Codes, because you did not ask for any type of deviation from what codes would allow for the size of your building. The only thing that you have asked for is a setback variance, which we have to have a hardship in order to grant. And you've asked for a building material requirement variance. And I'm not familiar with the exact requirements of the material other than what Mr. Hargis had mentioned earlier, that it has to be substantially similar to that of your home. But apparently at one point in time, you had indicated to codes that you wanted to use vinyl siding and metal.
No.
And now you've told us
No.
brick.
No, it'd be brick.
So then are you withdrawing your request for a materials variance, or do you still need a material variance? Do you still want to ask the board for a materials variance? I mean, sir, this is what you brought to the board, okay? And I don't mean to be short, because but I'm trying to understand why you're here. And so if you want to fully follow codes and build your outbuilding, go get you a permit for where you can build it with the materials that you're required to under this overlay, then you don't need to be here today. But you've specifically asked to vary from the material, and you've asked to push this thing to the back of your lot. And I need to hear a hardship for why you need to do that on both cases.
Well, my wife probably put a lot of that in there. She's not a builder. I have built a garage just like that in Madison. I had a guy come in. He dug a foundation. I'd like to get in touch with that guy again, because he done a fantastic job. He had about 3 people that was down in there while they was doing the foundation, doing iron metals. He ordered in the biggest load of concrete he can have and put that in the ground. And then we started from that with like block. And on the outside of the block, it will be brick. Does that make any sense?
Well, sir, it does. But again, we're not the Department of Codes. We don't give you permission to do anything in terms of how you build your building, other than when you want to deviate from the rules. And the reason that you are at this board is because you have proposed to us that you want to deviate from the rules. You have specifically said in your application you want a variance for the location, and you also want a variance for the materials. And that is what you submitted, sir. And so, I mean, it may have been your wife. That's fine, but I'm just telling you, that's why we're here.
My wife.
Sir, let me make a suggestion. You've got 6 minutes left. You could yield some time to your wife to have her explain it if she understands this application better.
Capital suggestion.
Yeah, sir. And so, I mean, that's what we're here today, is to decide whether or not you are able to locate your outbuilding closer to the back property line, and whether or not you are able to vary from the required materials that the overlay requires. That is the only 2 questions we were asked today.
The material that I build the garage with will be as nice as the material that goes into my house.
Well, and that's not, again, I appreciate that. I don't know the specific rules for the overlay, the materials in the overlay, but if you say it's going to look like your house, then it sounds to me like you don't need a variance for the materials. And so unless you can tell me something otherwise, that will be your testimony and we can decide that one. But what we need to know from you too is, are you able to build this at least 20 feet from the back property line?
Mr. Taylor, may I ask you just
Sure.
a question of the applicant and then I guess Mr. Hargis? Are you on sewer or are you on septic? Are you using the septic fields?
No. I'm
You're
on
not
sewer.
using, so you're on sewer now?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. That answered actually both of them. Thank you.
So, sir, is there,
Dr. Richard Presley, when he bought the house, he bought the lot, and he has the sewer that runs right straight back.
But you're on sewer. That was all I needed to know.
Yeah, sewer, yeah.
okay, and sir, is there a reason that you have for us today why you have to build closer to the property line? Is there a reason you can't build 20 feet, at least 20 feet away from your property line at the back?
Well, that would be 20 feet of grass and all back there. So you'd have a building, and a building, and then all that property line back there.
You'd have 20 feet. You'd have 20 feet.
The 20 feet.
Okay.
Are the trees we see in this photo on your property, the trees in the photo, are those on your property or the neighbor's property?
Do what?
Are the trees shown in the photo on your property or the neighbor's property?
It's on the edge of the easement, that tree line,
On
which needs to be taken care of. And I have all kind of water coming down from that hill, and it's washing big ruts in my backyard.
On the edge of the 10-foot easement?
I can't hear you.
Oh, no, can you ask?
Yeah, well, maybe I can ask this in a different way, and this may be more for Joey. So looking at parcel viewer, it looks like there is a common space for the neighboring subdivision at the rear of his property. And is that correct? And is that, because I think that maybe getting some terms confused between the easement, which is a right-of-way on this gentleman's property versus a separate property that's owned by the neighboring subdivision. So I'm trying to figure out, is there an actual easement on this gentleman's property? And then, yeah.
There is a 10-foot easement on this gentleman's property.
10 foot.
Yes, sir, that's.
Okay. So if that's the case, then allowing a variance of 2 feet would allow him to build within the easement. Is that correct?
Correct. He would have to get
Okay.
the approval of the utility easements to locate within their easement, but.
All right. And thank you.
But we don't know where the trees are in relation to because to me, the trees are a hardship, and we wouldn't want them to tear down the trees. That's why I was asking.
Yeah, and
Certainly.
the only thing we have from him is that it was at the edge of the easement.
Well, there's one thing that I intend to do with those trees. Anything that's hanging over my property is going to be cleared away.
All right, sir, and do you have anything else to add at this point for the board? Is there anything else that you'd like to add at this point for the board? We have to hear from the opposition, and then you'll have a chance to come back and rebut what they say.
I'm 80 years old. I never have gone through this. So I'm trying to do the best I can to let you understand that with all that easement back there, and then you want to put 20 more foot back there. You could have an interstate coming down through there. Why not just let me build the building 2 foot off? And if I can't build it 2 foot off, then I will build it attached to my house.
Okay. Sir, you have 5 minutes and 29 seconds left for your testimony. We're going to hear from the opposition, and then you can come back and make your final case.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
Now sit here or go back?
No, sir, if you'll have a seat back, just have a seat back in the back, or just
Okay.
where you were, just in the chairs off the table, and then we'll call for those folks who are in opposition to come to the table. Anybody that'd like to speak, there's 10 minutes total. The council member's time doesn't count against that 10 minutes. And if you would, just make sure the red light's on and state your name and address and why you're in opposition to this project.
My name is John Link, L-I-N-K. I live at 353 Willowbow Lane, which is on the same side of the road as the property we're dealing with, and we're directly next door. The easement at the back of the neighborhood, the actual easement is for stormwater drainage. I've got a 6-foot culvert running through my side yard to take care of the water that was coming off Brandywine Point. And this was an arrangement that I worked out with the Brandywine Point builder because you could ride a canoe through my yard when it rained hard. Currently, the trees that you had asked about on the line, they're pretty much exactly where the original fence is. They're on the line. The easement extends on both sides of that for stormwater drainage.
And how far does it extend on both sides of that? Is that the 10-foot easement?
10 foot. It actually uses more than that. Brandywine Point has got a common area along that fence that part of it is related to the stormwater easement as well. When it rains hard now, with the driveway addition that Mr. Harris added, we have water under our house, in our garage, that's coming off of the existing driveway. To add an additional burden of 1,500 square foot building will pretty much wash us to the next neighborhood, I think. I don't think it can be rectified if it's built like that. Also, I think one of the other variances that he had asked for was in a height. He wanted to go above 16 feet, and I might be wrong about that.
That's not on our docket. So if that was discussed, it might have been something that was passed along in the neighborhood, but the only two items we have are the closeness to the rear and the type of materials used. And
if he builds it as close to the rear, I'm sorry, if he builds it as close to the rear as he wants to, he'll have water 2 feet up on his foundation for the garage. There's no way it can be made to handle the amount of water that comes through there now.
And do you have any buildings in the back of your
I have
property?
a little Dutch barn that was
And how
shown
far
on,
does it sit off your property line?
20 feet.
Okay. And so his building would, and again, if it were built to codes, then that would presumably be where he could build his.
Well, he wants to build all the way within 2 feet of those trees.
Okay.
And he had a majority of the fence line cleared out last summer and left the trees that were directly on the line. And when he did that, he disrupted the natural drain water along the creek. And now that the creek comes across his yard, like he mentioned, but unfortunately I'm directly downhill, so it comes across my yard as well. It actually runs into my swimming pool, and it has to jump a 5-foot coping
Okay.
to do that.
So that shed in the picture, is that yours?
Yes, ma'am. The fence that you see is the privacy fence, and then the little Dutch barn looking thing, that's our property, my wife and I. We've lived there 37 years and never, I'm dry, I'm sorry. We never really had a problem. And when he talks about building it right next to his house, touching his house, I can't really picture that a building of that size would fit there. it would mean that Mr. Jameson, the house that's above him, and I think he sent a letter to the board, his view from his pool will be the building. It'll be a giant, large, maybe brick, but it'll be a big brick building.
Yeah, and we are only a board of zoning appeals, so we are only looking at people that are requesting to deviate from the rules. And thankfully, we are not a homeowner association or a problem solver to figure out how somebody would do it. But exactly, I certainly understand your point of view, but I'm glad that, and we very much appreciate, and would think of that ourselves, but thankfully, we only have to answer those two questions today is, should he set it back to the back, which you have said, there are severe drain water issues. And is there, as the next door neighbor, do you know of any reason why he couldn't build 20 feet from the property line?
From the back property line?
From the back property line. That's what you're allowed to do by code. Is there a reason that he would have to go further back?
Something will have to happen to the creek that's back there, or it's going to, every time it rains, it's going to come out of the bank. If you look in that picture, you see of his property, you see a little sitting area with a little green roof, like a picnic pavilion. Right there, the bottom right picture for me is the correct. Just on the left side of that, as we look at it here, the creek comes out of the bank and runs across his backyard and my backyard.
Okay.
And I'm not a builder, but it seems to me that the more area under roof that we have there, the more problem we're going to have with rainwater clearance. I sent a letter to this board. Did y'all receive it?
Yes, we have quite a number of letters from the neighbors, a lot more letters than there are people that took the time to come here, which is certainly fine. It's in our packet and it's on the record.
Yes, sir. I can't think of anything else I need to say unless I could answer questions for y'all.
Any questions for this person? All right, ma'am, did you have something you'd like to say?
No, he said it all.
Okay. With no questions, and is there anyone else that came to speak in opposition that would like to speak? All right, sir, yeah, if you all, and you all have 6 minutes total to make your statements, and that's, again, for everybody, so.
Hi.
All right, sir. Yeah, name, address, and tell us what you're.
Jim Graves, 165 Chute Circle in neighboring subdivision, Brandywine Point subdivision. And I'm here because I received, apparently within the circumference or however they measure it. I'm in opposition for a couple of reasons. And before I get into that, point of clarity, Mr. Newton, I think you're right on target. There's common area that's owned by the HOA in Brandywine Point that pretty well surrounds the subdivision, okay? So that may be some of the confusion in the amount of easement. I'm concerned, number one, that non-conforming building materials would have a negative impact on property value for both subdivisions. I'm pretty sure that's why this ordinance was put into place, not in the too far distant past. And for a lot of people, this is a major investment that they've made to live in one of these two subdivisions. Building within the 2-foot property line, I have a grave concern about disrupting the root system of those trees and the trees dying. It's a natural buffer right now, not only for aesthetics, but it's also a buffer for drainage, et cetera, et cetera. And if you eliminate that natural buffer, you're probably going to lose the trees and the green space that's there. So just want to voice my opinion about being in opposition. Nothing against the requests, but I just think that we need to stay within the variance requirements.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Sir, did you have a question for him?
Let me ask you one question, sir. Now,
Yes.
You mentioned that there was an HOA.
Yes.
Are you an officer or
No,
anything
I'm
of
not.
the HOA?
I am
You're just
not.
an individual?
I cannot speak for Brandywine
That's all I
Point
want.
HOA. I pay my dues, but.
I understand. Thank you, sir.
All right.
My name is Alan Hand. I live at 348 Willowbow, which is across the street, so I'm not directly impacted, but I just want to basically reiterate some other points about following the codes that obviously the council member has created in this area, just to try to meet the standards for the building materials and setback. I would agree as well, too. I don't foresee a reason why there should be a setback amendment to to this. It should probably at least to the minimum 20 feet away from the setback to help the other property owners, because I obviously live out there as well, too, and I feel the same way. I think we want to make sure we have something that's comparable to our neighborhood, and it helps the property value for everybody in that area as well, too. So that's really my points about it as well, too. I have no really other objection. If it was probably built to standard, I really can't say anything, because I respect people's ability to build things on their property, just as long as it's done to codes as well, too. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any questions? All right, thank you. Is there anybody else that would like to speak in opposition?
I'll speak
There are
quickly.
3 minutes and 40 seconds, so there's
I'll be
time. There's
quick.
no. There's plenty of
Nope,
time
I want
for
Mr. Hager
plenty of
speak.
time for everybody to speak that'd like to.
Give me my minutes. I'm Debbie Miller. I live at 337 Willowbow Lane.
Okay.
And all I want to say is Mr. Hager put this zoning overlay for reasons that has just ruined our neighborhood. Issues that were done, buildings that
Right.
were built, and then he saw the need to do this. And if people keep wanting to fight that, it makes no sense to me. And what this man wants to do, we are in total opposition. I did email a letter and mail a letter,
Right.
and I'll give Mr. Hager his
And ma'am,
time.
do you, do you live on the same side of the street? Is the applicant, are you next door too, or are you just down, you're down?
I'm 2-3 doors down.
Okay. And so I guess the question we've asked, and it's the applicant's burden to prove this, not you all, but I'm just asking you, is there any reason that you know of living in the same side of the street that the applicant couldn't follow the rules as written?
I don't know
Okay.
a clue why he can't follow the rules.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Thank you.
Ma'am, I'm sorry, there's
Ma'am,
one more
Can I
question.
just ask one question?
Sorry, Tom.
No, that's all right. Normally, it's good for you to ignore me, but there's been some discussions concerning the rain and drainage down there, and one of the other commissioners and I were sort of looking at the topography. Does it flood often back in the back that you're
Well,
aware of? You live on the same side.
I live on the same side. No.
Are you uphill, so
down?
you're contributing to the flow down?
I may be. I'm up. You would say I'm up
Okay.
a bit. I mean, it's gradual. I just know that when we had the 2010 flood, our yard, and even now, when we have good rains, we pond on this side of that grassy knoll, because it's raised a bit as you go toward the tree. You know, in the tree line, it's kind of raised up and down. So our yard does pond significantly on, and we put in French drains and drains into the back with holding pipes. We spent a fortune to try to hold the water till it could seep. And that was after the flood that we did all that. But yes, we did. I have had ducks swimming in my makeshift ponds in the back on good rains. And we've had some really good rains just this year. I mean, where it flooded, not scarily, because we have pushed it to the back of our property. Does that help?
Oh, it helped a lot.
Okay, thank you,
Thank
sir.
you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Councilman, do you? Wherever you'd like to be is fine. Yeah, if you don't mind just turning your mic on and let us know who you are.
That it? I got it. I'm used to standing up in court, so it makes me more comfortable. Let me give you the history on this, and I'm sorry about my laryngitis. But a year and a half ago, Brandywine Farms does not have the restrictive covenants anymore. They're only good for 20 years. We had somebody move in the neighborhood, and they built what I call a pole barn. And I'll let you pass those pictures out. That's what started this. So neighbors called me up, and I said, well, let me look at some ordinances. So I went to Goodlettsville. Goodlettsville has an ordinance that's very similar to what I passed. For the first step is I had to pass an overlay countywide for all of Davidson County for detached accessory buildings. And that's what this is. Once I got that passed, then I passed it just specifically for Brandywine Farms. Brandywine Point has an HOA that controls detached buildings. Brandywine Place is to the west of us, which has an HOA that controls the buildings that are detached. So when we pass this, they can be 16 feet in height, 1,200 square feet. They got to comply with all the setback lines. Same thing City of Goodlettsville has. My ordinance was the same type of ordinance. And what it does is for suburban type homes that have large lots like we do, you got 1 acre lots, most of them, it helps control the context and the ambiance of the neighborhood. You know, the lady got mad at me when I called it a pole barn, and I said, I was raised up in the country. I know what a pole barn is. And if you can tell those pictures, it's a pole barn. She has a big tractor trailer rig that they keep inside of that garage, as she calls it, but it's a pole barn. As such, all I'm asking Mr. Harris to do is comply with my ordinance and keep the context and ambiance of the neighborhood as it exists today. Now that was built before my ordinance passed. So I explained to him that was grandfathered in. The permit had already been issued, nothing I could do about it. But at the same time, all due respect to Mr. Harris, I don't care if he builds his garage back there, but comply with the ordinance, comply with the setback lines. He's not showing any hardship at all. Appreciate y'all allowing me to come talk today. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for the councilman? All right, thank you. Any other, I think we'd already called for the last of the opposition. And so at this time, we'll ask the applicant, sir, if you could come back, and you'll have 5 minutes and 29 seconds to respond to what you heard and answer questions from the board and make your final case. And if you would just press that red button, press the button. I think Jessica's going to help. And no, sir, closer to you.
Thank you.
There you go.
We do have a serious problem with water coming off that hill. A serious problem. Now, it has put ruts in my backyard this deep where it rushes off the hill into my yard. Now, the next door neighbor to the right of me has tried to dump that water coming down through there over into where it's supposed to run. Now, with all that water coming down, mud and all that, that needs to be all cleaned out to where when it's coming down that hill, it can be made going into that waterway. Is that making any sense?
Yes, sir. I mean, I understand your point. I'm not sure that I understand, based on everything that we've heard from your neighbors and how that creek operates, why you want to be closer to the creek than further away from the creek. But I understand that from your testimony and from your neighbor's testimony that there is a serious water issue in the rear of your property.
Mm-hmm. It is. And I would like for somebody to clean it up. The people that own it, Davidson County or whoever owns it, needs to take care of it. And we won't have that problem.
Right. Okay.
Because after a year or two, all that water is coming down through there. It needs to be cleaned to where it's got the depth to carry the water on down to the river.
Okay. Did you have anything else to add, sir, about the need for having your building further to the rear of your property and/or the materials that you're going to use? Those are the two issues before us today.
The building that I build will have every good-looking thing, just like my house. Now, my wife helped put all this together,
Okay.
so I didn't understand none of this.
Mr.
And I certainly understand that, sir, too,
May I
because,
ask
yes, sir,
about 3 questions?
absolutely.
If you attach this to your house, like you were talking about, you're going to make it look like the house, right? It's going to have brick, and it's going to be attached to the house, correct?
If it can't be,
If it can't be in the back, let's just say you don't get the votes today to get the variance that you want. So if you attach to the house, it's going to look like the house, isn't it? Okay, so that's not a problem if you have to do that.
if it's back there,
That's not, no. Listen to my question. I'm going to try to keep it simple.
It'll all
If it's
be-
attached to the house, it's going to look like the house, correct?
brick,
Yeah, it's going to look
Everything.
like your house now. It's not going to be, fluorescent brick or anything like that. It's going to look like the brick you got now. Okay. And you can do that the way you've envisioned it, not in the back part, but right there, right at the house. Is that correct?
if I built it 2 foot off the back property line.
Forget
it
about the
would-
2
it would-
feet
it
right
would
now.
be-
Listen to my questions, please, Mr. Dowling. Listen to my questions. If you build it on the back of your house, you're going to make it look like the house, aren't you?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so it's going to be brick. Because if you don't do that, your wife's going to be all upset with you, right? If you put something strange looking there. So
Yeah, I'll have to sleep on the couch.
Yep, and that's not real good for the back when you wake up in the morning, trust me. All right, so it's going to look like the rest of the house, and it's going to be proportioned so that it's not going to be 25, 30 foot tall. It's going to be like the house, and it's going to look good, right?
Right.
And that's not going to cause a real big problem if it's attached to the house, correct?
No, it won't cause a problem, but I would like for it to be back there, and it would look just like the house, either place.
Okay, so, well, you just answered the rest of my questions. Thank you very much, Mr.
right.
Dowling, appreciate it. No
All right.
further questions.
Thank you, sir. And, sir, did you have anything else to add? Did you have anything else to add at this point?
Other than I hope that they fix the water problem we have coming down that hill. On the rains that we've having here lately, it's a flood coming down that hill.
Okay.
It comes down on their property. It comes down on our property off that hill.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much. And with that, we will close the public hearing and discuss.
Thank you, Mr. Dowling. You're welcome to return to your seat. Thank you.
All right.
Mr. Taylor, with greatest respect, I'm going to make a motion that we deny the request. There's been no proof of any necessity, and with all due respect to Mr. Dowling, his direct testimony is, it's not a hardship for him to put it on his house. So I'm just going to make the motion now. You can overrule me and call me out.
Oh, no,
of order, and I'll
you
accept
have
it.
every right to make a motion, and is there a second to that motion?
I'll second it.
There's a motion and there's a second, and so we can have a discussion on the motion. And I agree, and, you know, I do respect, you know, a citizen coming in wanting to do something, and I also understand why, again, I've been on this board a long time, and there's an awful lot of terms that were expressed today that I don't know that were meant the same thing to the same people. And I would certainly think that there was nothing about that piece of property that suggested that the applicant couldn't achieve what he wanted to achieve under the rules that were proposed and passed by the councilman, and that that maybe a contractor or an architect or a surveyor could help relate that exactly. And you know, I think there may be still some confusion about that old sewer septic tank issue, which is not applicable anymore. But in terms of practicality, hardship expression, I think that the burden has not been met, and I agree with the motion. So I'm not sure if there, sorry, Christina?
It's only going to add that if we allowed the variance, he would be building in the easement.
Right, which he wouldn't be allowed to do anyway. And like I said, I really do sincerely think there's some confusion on exactly what that means, again, with that historic septic easement that no longer exists. But again, that's the applicant can figure that out. We have a motion and a second. And was there any other discussion? Then we'll call the question. All in favor of the motion, say aye. Raise your hand. Any opposed? That motion passes. All right. Wish everybody good luck, and thank you all for coming. So that the motion was to deny the variance, and that motion passed.
Case 2021-75 is denied on a vote 5-0. Mr. Chairman, the next case before us, and case 2021-76 and 2021-77.
And folks, excuse me, folks, if you all certainly can carry on your conversations, but we have another case to hear, and if you would do that outside, we would appreciate that. Mr. Hargis.
No problem. Mr. Chairman, I linked these together because both cases are identical. They're adjoining properties. All factors are the same for both cases. So I would ask that the board, in crafting your motion, will need a motion for both cases, but procedurally, if we could hear them together, it's the exact same case.
Yeah, I think unless there's objection from the board, then we will proceed that way, and then we'll have a separate motion for each.
All right, Mr. Chairman, this case comes before you. Hummingbird Investments, LLC is the appellant and owner of the properties located at 1036 and 1040 2nd Avenue South. They are requesting an Item D appeal to alter the structure containing a non-conforming use in R6 UZO district. The appellant is seeking to add a second-story addition with a rooftop deck over the existing quadruplex buildings. Referred to the board under Section 1740-650, the appellant has alleged the board would have jurisdiction under Section 1740-180, Item D. I do want to note for the record, this case also could have been cited for 1740-660, dealing with nonconforming structures. The buildings themselves that you see on this drawing at the time were constructed did comply with the setbacks. The council has changed how we measure setbacks now, so they're actually not compliant with the existing setbacks, and you see that number there. But we didn't cite that on the thing because the code says that these structures may be enlarged or converted to another use provided there's no increase in the degree of nonconformity, and the applicant's not proposing to extend the front of the buildings toward the street any closer. So that's why I didn't mark that in the notes section.
So the degree of nonconformity applies on that, but not on the generic, on the request before us?
Correct, not on the vertical. So what's before you is these are legally nonconforming quadruplex buildings, so 4 units in each structure. R6 only permits 2 units. So that's what's before you. To give you a little bit of further background, the Tennessee Code was amended probably going on 10 years now. For years and years, Sonny West and other zoning administrators, we treated multifamily like a business under 137208, the nonconforming statute of state law. And that statute kind of thumbnailing says that businesses are allowed to demolish facilities and rebuild them, enlarge them even, so long as there's a reasonable amount of space for this expansion. So for years and years, apartments were treated as businesses under the code. In Red Bank, Tennessee, there was a case that came, I think it went from the Court of Appeals, that basically said no longer could you treat multifamily like a business. You had to treat them as residential, which unfortunately for about an 18-month period, every apartment complex or structure that had 3 or more units across the state that was in single or 2-family zoning had no protections under the code except what local government had. So the legislature went in and created protections for those buildings, but only protects them from involuntary damage. So that's why in years past, you might remember being the longest serving member on the board, before that statute passed, we used to bring these cases to the Board of Zoning Appeals to allow an applicant to tear the structure down and build something completely new under the board's authority. But the board no longer has that, and that the legislature has acted to protect these. So why he's before you is this use is nonconforming. The structure is also nonconforming, but what's before you is this expansion of the nonconforming use is what you're hearing.
So we had a, I don't know that it ever made it to us, and I'm not sure why, but we had a quadruplex that, they were wanting to basically double in size, and it seemed like there was some issue of if it was more than 50% destroyed or taken down, that they'd have to take it fully up to codes. Is that in place here?
That is not in place here. This structure is going to remain. He's going to add a second-story addition to this existing structure. The case you were talking about was over on Moore Road, and they were going to fully drop those buildings and replace those, and that damage or destruction exceeded 50%. They were trying to find some method of leaving walls to sort of grandfather their location.
But you're kind of doing this too, though, because you're taking the roof off and getting all the walls. But
well, in this portion, the roof coming off's okay.
The applicant's case, but I'm just trying to understand where it falls with our rules and whatnot.
No, for us, he's going to remove the roof structure. The walls themselves will remain. He's got to be mindful of not crossing that threshold of 50% damage, because once he does, he's no longer protected, neither under Metro Code or state code. So to the extent that this structure has to remain intact at a 50% of the value or floor area of this building, he's got to be very mindful of that in this renovation, and he's aware of that. The case you were talking about was probably 3 or 4 months back that originally was scheduled for this board, but was withdrawn by John Michael at the time because they were voluntarily destroying this building. So he's got a threshold in which he can do some renovations, but he's got to be mindful of that. So the section that includes here, and I'll just read it for the records, it's 1740-650, and talks about the most important section, I guess, in this would be item D, alteration of a structure containing a nonconforming use for any use not otherwise protected by 13.7208 subsection E of this code. Again, that was this use is now protected by state statute, but only in involuntary means. Alterations other than incidental shall be permitted only through the issuance of a permit by the Board of Zoning Appeals, but the floor area ratio and expanded use together shall not exceed the FAR for the district. So in R6, we don't have an FAR for multifamily, so they're not going to be subjected to that. So it's under this board's purview whether this proposed addition is appropriate in this case. 1740-180, item B of your powers and jurisdiction talks about item D says, changes to nonconforming uses or structures, the board shall determine the appropriateness of proposed changes to nonconforming uses or structures. So that's your threshold question is what he's proposing appropriate. And that's for you all to judge, but that sort of sets up the procedural background of this case.
So, Mr. Horace, how is it nonconforming?
It's nonconforming in that there are 4 units per each lot, so it's a quadruplex, and R6 does not permit beyond 2 family dwellings.
Okay.
And that's the nonconforming use portion of this.
Okay, but what he's proposing does not increase the degree of nonconformity.
That's correct. He is not increasing the number of units on the property. He does increase the size of the structure, and that's what you all have to determine if that's appropriate. But he's not altering or expanding the use any. So he's still going to have 4 units per lot.
What would the criteria for determining whether it's appropriate or not be?
It's completely up to your discretion. If Alex feels differently, I'll certainly pivot to him. But the drafters of this code granted this board authority to decide what that appropriateness is. So.
All right. Thank you. That's helpful. Is there any other questions about? We don't hear these very often, and to me, sometimes it's nice to have that perspective.
And I'm sorry to bore you with the state law case, but it's Red Bank is what happened. But for years and years, you would never see these. We'd issue a permit, and as long as you basically putting it back in the same footprint, we'd issue it. But with that case law that came down from the Court of Appeals, we had to come up with a different method, and we altered our way of handling these cases. So you may see them more frequently in the future, but at current pace, I wouldn't think you'd see them too frequently. But
So the question here is not hardship.
it is not a hardship standard. It's like if you whether what he's proposing is appropriate given the circumstances, and I think you could kind of draw from SE stuff to does it match the character of the neighborhood? Is it in keeping with kind of what's there? But at the end of the day, we're going to apply the code as far as setbacks. He's vested in the front setback. He's not coming close to the road, but the code in 1740-180D says you determine the appropriateness of the change to the nonconforming use. So that's kind of your discretion. This is photographs of both lots. Each lot contains an identical quadruplex building. We've looked through our records, make sure it's legally nonconforming before it got here, and it was legally permitted at the time. It was built under the city zoning code at the time. So predates this ordinance, predates the prior ordinance, and has 4 units in each structure. And then this is the lot at 1036 on the left, I believe, and 1040s on the right-hand side. Again, you see these are all side-loaded quadruplex buildings. And then this is a view looking south on 2nd Avenue South toward Mildred Chute Lane, toward Chestnut in the distant background. And then views looking north toward this building in Lafayette Street. And the applicant submitted to you elevations of proposal, not the exact structure, but in keeping with what he's proposing to do, and I'll let him address that. But that's our case. Sir, you'll have 5 minutes to present your case. There's no parties present or opposed. I've not received any comments or letters in regards to this case. So.
All right, Josh Helmer, 1071 2nd Avenue South. And yeah, what we're proposing, like Mr. Harga said, was to add a second floor and a rooftop deck to these homes. It's actually pretty rare when you buy these old quadplexes that they're in good shape. These are in great shape. I've had them looked at by a structural engineer. It's just that each unit is only about 650 square feet. So they're very small. They no longer fit in with the neighborhood. And I don't feel like demoing them is the best thing to do. Buildings are demoed all over the city, all over the place, way too often, I feel like. And I think we can save these and make them fit in with the neighborhood and make them taller and larger and more useful to tenants in the future. There is a UDO that's going to go into our neighborhood at some point in time that if I waited till then and wanted to tear these down, I could actually put 10 units on the property. I have no interest in doing that. These buildings do not need to be torn down, so I would just like to modify them and make them larger.
Okay, and so you have talked to a structural engineer and the existing foundations and all that. I mean, you're not going to do any foundation work or anything like that?
Nope, foundations are good, all the brick is good. So what we would do is raise the ceiling height of the first floor 1 foot, add a second level, add a rooftop deck.
So I guess and you submitted some elevations and I think so.
Where are those?
They're on page 77 of our packet. They're right there. That's what you're looking at. Which I think are these.
Correct. Those are in Germantown. So our street is seeing more brownstone style homes. Right. So what I would like to do is build those with like that false facade 3rd floor, so the rooftop decks get some privacy, but that it fits in with the rest of this 3-story houses on our street.
All that looks great. How do you convert those in your homes into these homes and have less than 50% of the current home? I mean, I don't, I mean, are you going to match the brick? Are you going to replace the brick? Are you?
I think if I understand the code correctly, it's that I cannot remove 50% of the existing structure, not that I can't add more than 50%.
Now, I understand that, but I'm just saying, I'm not sure what your ending path is, and it may not be for this board. You know, to some extent, I believe it is, because, you know, with what you're doing, at some point, it just feels like codes is going to step in and say, you've done too much, or they're not going to, you know, the lot on the plate and that kind of thing. I don't see the path, but I got two architects on here, they can talk about it too. But in terms of, you know, if this is what it's going to look like, then do you keep the brick that's on the existing place and match it?
Yes. Yep. Yeah, I'm not sure exactly what the term too much means, because, I mean, we're just adding a level and a rooftop deck. We're not demoing the existing buildings. The existing footprint on these buildings right now is 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, extremely small kitchen, extremely small living room. So what's going to happen is the first floor is going to turn into more of an open space with a staircase. The second level will have 2 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, and then there'll be a small doghouse that leads to a rooftop deck.
Yeah.
And the existing neighborhood allows for 3 stories, 45 feet. We'll be far under that. We won't have 3 stories. It'll be 2 stories.
Yeah, I mean, it is totally clear that what you're wanting to do is in tying with what the neighborhood's doing, and that's fine. And it sounds like today our question is, can you do it with 4 per property or 2 per property? I mean, like I said, you could tear these down right now and build 2 on each, I believe. Is that right?
Correct. If I tore them down today, I could build 2 on each.
Or you could wait and build 10, and I get it. It makes sense. It totally makes sense. And maybe I'm too focused on where you want to go with it, which I think, again, I think it's lovely. I look at what this picture here and the picture you sent with where it wants to go and say, how can you, well, you know, maybe you're the magician. How do you do that without hitting that 50% threshold? But again, it may not be.
But I don't think the 50% threshold is adding anything. The 50% threshold is I cannot remove more than 50% of those buildings.
Right. But
it won't be.
Right.
All those walls will remain. So the roof will be taken off. The 8-foot ceiling will be turned into a 9-foot ceiling. We'll set trusses, build a second floor, set trusses, build a rooftop deck. So the existing structures will not change by 50%. They'll just be added to going vertical. None of the setbacks will change. There'll be some garages built in the back that will conform to the setbacks and the FAR. The buildings themselves will not be altered more than 50% like their current structures. We're adding to them. Right. If I removed, you know, you're looking at technically 8 walls or 7 walls. Yeah. Those levels are different. If I removed all the walls and kept 1, then yes, I'm breaking the rules. If we keep all of those walls, modify the existing floor plan. I had a conversation with John Michael. Unfortunately, he's no longer here, but if I would not tear the roof off, just change the inside, there's no problem. It's only because we're tearing the roof off that we have to talk about it.
Okay. Well, that's helpful. Thank you.
Yeah.
This is a question probably more for Joey. Is when they say 50% of the structure, does that include interior walls, or does that just apply to structural walls or structural frame? Like,
yeah, we look at it more in total, and I wasn't present when he spoke with John, but that comports with our way of doing things. Even my previous tenure, we did that. We looked at, and I'll give you a perfect example. If you'll recall, when McDonald's burnt down at 12th and Broadway, we deemed that was less than 50% destruction because they had a full basement in that. They had a full floor area in that. So clearly, what was that visual ground level was completely burned, you know, down. But because they had that full basement under there, they never crossed that threshold with us for floor area. And it's to this point, he's keeping the 4 exterior walls, so he's not changing the floor area in it. He is removing the roof part and raising that. But for us, we saw that as maintaining. What we wouldn't allow somebody to do is knock 2 of the walls down, keep 2, and then claim they're at 50%. In my mind, they're gone beyond that. So if you keep that box for us and we're maintaining the footprint that's there on the walls, then we're going to.
So you don't have an issue with the 50% rule at this point? Okay, so I may have gone down a rabbit hole that didn't need to go down. But sorry.
That's all right.
You come here to this board enough. You can tell us. You can tell us that you are.
And one of the reasons that some of the interior walls have to be moved is in '64 when these were built, there's no firewalls. right?
Okay.
So if I don't remove some interior walls, I can't build
Right.
firewalls to protect all the different tenants, and that's
Okay.
one of the things have to.
So I guess the only other question I was, and then again, this is maybe for compatibility, you talked about these being 600 square feet on each floor, so you're talking about 1,200 square feet per unit-ish,
Yeah, I think-
plus the deck, plus maybe a little bit here and there.
Yep.
And then how does that compare to the rest of the neighborhood where you have duplex? It seems like they may be smaller than some of the others that are going up that are 2 per lot. I mean, if you had to tear these down and build 2, I'm assuming you would build bigger homes.
If I tore them down and built 2, I would probably build 2 4,000 square foot houses on each
Okay,
property.
yeah, so there's maybe an affordability component to these too, because they're just going to be smaller.
Exactly. Yeah, and I mean, I don't know if we have any aerial views, but if you look, I think 3 lots down, maybe we can pull up parcel viewer. I think 3 lots down, there's 10 jammed on 80 feet wide. Right now, we have 8 on 100 feet. I just don't see the need to tear these down. I mean, they can be in the future if that's what needs to be done, but I just don't see the reason to tear down buildings that are perfectly fine.
Okay.
I think it's way smarter to just modify these, but yeah, if you look just a few doors down, once that comes. And those were done under old SPs, but the new UDO RM20 ANS zoning would allow for 10 here. I just don't see the need to tear these down.
Okay. Any other questions for the applicant at this point? Did you have anything else to add at this point?
I do not.
Yeah, members of the board, I also kind of affirm, what we talked about originally is that what the applicant's proposing is whether that's appropriate. I mean, he is still subject to floor area ratio, to height restrictions, setbacks, those type of things there. They are, the footprints of these are legally non-conforming in setbacks and off the street, off the side setbacks on the south parcel for sure. They do comply with the rear setbacks off the alley. But he is still subject to FAR, so although, he hasn't submitted a final design to us, we will check that to make sure he's compliant.
All right, thank you. We will close the public hearing, since I don't think I officially did that, and see if there's,
Can I just tell him where those are? It's those white ones right there. I'm not sure who's controlling that. Joey, are you? So it's those white ones right there. So basically what they did was jam 10 on 80 feet.
okay,
So you can kind of see what the neighborhood is, looks like.
okay, great, thank you.
Yep.
All right, so once again, the public hearing is closed. Thoughts?
I mean, as was kind of, it's a tall task to be able to, to build a new structure on top and do that, but I think it can be done. I would not say these are architecturally significant structures as they're existing, but, they'll probably be improved in some way, by his plan. But I think as far as what we're here to decide, which is, whether it's appropriate for the context, I think I would say it is appropriate for the context. And he's got to figure out how he's going to actually do it, make it happen. But,
Yeah,
I thought.
is that a motion?
I'll make a motion that we.
Let me say,
okay.
we need to have 2, so.
Yes.
Because it's 2 cases, so if you want to make a motion for case 76, feel free, and then, depending upon how that goes down, we'll make a motion for 77.
I will make a motion to approve the item D appeal for case 2021-076. That is because it's appropriate with the existing structure in neighborhood context.
And I'll second.
Got a motion, got a second, any discussion? All in favor, say aye, raise your hand.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion passes. Mr. Newton.
All right, I'll make a motion for case 2021-077 that we approve the item D appeal based on the appropriateness of the plan and neighborhood context.
Second.
All right, that motion has been seconded. Any discussion? All in favor of that motion, say aye and raise your hand. Aye. Any opposed? That motion passes unanimously. Again, congratulations and good luck. Thank you.
That
All right,
completes
with that, we are adjourned. I guess, you didn't have anything else, right? If you did, too bad, we're adjourned.
Congratulations,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Chairman. We got out of here in record time.
This has been a service of the Metro Nashville Network. If you would like to see this presentation again, or for more information about this and other programs, visit nashville.gov.